This scene is set in an alternate steampunk past in a town square in 1895, England. The environment centres on the scene of a car crash where the victim is seen to have disappeared immediately after the accident. The story's detective and protagonist, Lewis Cranshaw, is the first on the scene, as highlighted by the smoke still rising from the car engine and lack of authorities, and is searching for clues. The time period is easily recognisable by the style of buildings and types of assets in the scene, such as the steampunk architecture and old colour scheme. The player would understand that it is an alternate time period due to the presence of cars and an airship amongst steam railways and wooden carts and wagons. Because of the stars, dark sky sphere, and absence of people activity, the player would understand that it is late at night. The type of city that Cranshaw lives in is clarified through the scene. There are boxes haphazardly left outside buildings, trash left on the footpath, and crates of luggage left out overnight, all showing that the city is not awfully tidy, but is trusting enough to leave possibly important things out in the open. These assets also show how this particular square of the city is often busy or frequently used by its citizens, and may even be considered a meeting place of sorts due to the layout, railway station, and newspaper stand. The types of buildings, such as the factory and railway, and industrial items like gears, pipes, and oil barrels, also highlight the city's industrial nature, as is fitting with the steampunk theme and the setting of the late 1800s. The occasional posters and graffiti might indicate criminal activity, but given how minimal these assets are, they do not stress too great a sense of external threat in this area to the player, keeping them focused on the main crime. This wall was one of the retextured Quixel megascans and features tire marks and a paint scratch. This was included to indicate the path of the driver, how they have sideswiped the wall in an attempt to avoid a crash. This is also demonstrated by the torn poster, alongside the vehicle's final position and the knocked over bin, which has scattered trash across the street, enabling the player to theorise the driver's motions and assume whether the crash was accidental or not. Besides this first clue is a burnt cigarette pack, which was the second retextured megascan. The player might assume that it could have been accidentally lit by someone nearby, someone caught off guard by the incident, or even thrown from the vehicle and damaged along the way. The burnt texture indicates that the owner may have unintentionally burnt the packet itself rather than a cigarette, and the crumpled side shows how carelessly or frantically they discarded it, but the player may interpret this otherwise through their own imagination. Either way, it is one of the clues Cranshaw will note when investigating the scene. That's why both this and the damaged wall are more brightly lit than other areas. Telegraphing was also considered in the scene as, following these two clues, the player will naturally be drawn to the brightest light in the scene, that of the car's rear red headlights, those of which stand out amongst all the other elements. Depending on the player's playstyle, this may be their first interaction or the one they leave until the last moment, understanding its importance. The strategic placement of the items before the headlights, or the photo frame, the scene's hero asset, candles and letter, all suggest that the scene was organised, leading the player and Cranshaw respectively to recognise that this accident may have been staged, the victim framed. The inclusion of the candle assets and the delicately cut out image would infer that this is an incredibly personal attack, and one that is probably closely tied to Cranshaw's identity. As this is meant to be one of his family's photographs, stolen from his childhood home, the fear and uncertainty in this scene would be felt even further because of the player's knowledge of this. The fingerprints on the top of the frame would add to the feeling that someone has corrupted one of his personal belongings, and shows that it was likely only moved recently. The suitcases surrounding the crashed vehicle reveal that the person, whoever they may be, was clearly in a hurry to escape, potentially through the railway, as this is related to the initial direction of the vehicle. Their strewn luggage would suggest that they packed hastily, given that some papers have fallen out. The blood on the left suitcase highlights that there may have been a struggle, or that the victim was hurt on the vehicle's impact, that of which is emphasised by the smoke leaving the car's engine. The second suitcase, which was the third retextured megascan, shows faint fingerprints beside the lock, again reinforcing this idea that they left quickly and hastily, or even just that this particular case is used often. The light wear on the seams and corners indicates the item's age, potentially hinting at the victim's age too. The map would support the idea that they were in a hurry to leave, suggesting they were improvising on their destination or needing to go somewhere unknown. Since the victim possesses a car in this time period, it can be assumed that they are fairly well off or not struggling financially. The fact that there is not a blood trail and that the scene has likely been staged, all paired with the absence of a body, the player might also imagine that the true culprit has kidnapped the victim's body, which was the intention, or that they managed to make a narrow escape. Limitations to the player's exploration of the area have also been taken into account. As the player would want to explore the railway area, The use of the dark fog in construction assets establishes the player's boundaries and indicates that they cannot travel further beyond this point. This is shown through the cones placed behind the player's starting point as well, forcing them to remain within the scene's bounds and focus on the subject. Exponential height fog was used in the scene to create a more uneasy atmosphere, one that is reflective of Cranshaw's mixed feelings in the moment and the overall mood of the scene, underscoring the possibly more sinister things at play. This tone is supported by the environment's limited light, dark sky, and the red hue to the car headlights, a colour that mirrors Cranshaw's emotional position due to its associations with anger, fear, and other negative emotions. Overall, it is the vehicle's path of destruction, spilt luggage and blood marks, and presence of the railway that all show to the player that the victim was escaping, whilst the photo frame, candles, cigarette pack and letter suggest that someone else may have had a hand in the crime and were attempting to frame the driver's disappearance.